Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of our Revisiting series. This time we will be revisiting the city of Belgrade, and the writer who spent a month there is Lana Bastašić. Now, who is Lana Bastašić? She's the recipient of the EU Prize for Literature 2020, as well as the winner of several other literary accolades. So welcome, Lana. It's really great having you today.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're actually joining us from Belgrade today, which is kind of like a nice way, I guess, to end the residency. It seems like, especially after having read your essay, that you kind of come full circle. So we'll probably dive into that a bit later. But just what I have to say about the series is I find when I was reading your essay, it was really nice to see how everyone is experiencing it completely different. Like when we started out with the series with Uroš Prah, he was in Bucharest. It was the end of summer. He was, arriving when it was swelteringly hot. And then we moved on to Sofia Frusina Parmakovska, who basically was doing her residency during just when the pandemic started. And it was all topsy-turvy, but she basically finished her novel during the time, writing like almost half of it during her residency. And then now we come to you, and again, your essay has a completely different feel, a different tone to it. And actually, it's kind of like the opposite of what was happening to Frusina, that you actually say, I'm in Belgrade, I'm at this residency, I don't write. So just tell us a bit about that, how your experience was.
Yeah, it was a very important residency for me because I ended up, as you said, living in Belgrade. And for me, it was it wasn't my first time in Belgrade, but it was, this month you have this time block, and there's just you and the city and the writing. And I think for me, it was just, this Belgrade is like this concrete jungle of everything, and just kind of sucks you in, and then you have to find your way around it. And for me, I think it was a bit overwhelming. And then after a while, I could, start seeing the beauty. But for some reason, for the first time in my life, I was struggling with writer's block. I always, I used to think that was just an excuse for lazy writers. And my book had just come out, and it was doing great, but I was just like, a lot of things were happening for me in Belgrade and in the region, but I just couldn't, I had all the ideas, but just that moment of facing the blank page, it was just terrifying. And then my insomnia was back and all of these different things. And I thought, oh my God, just like these poor people gave me this residency. They should have given it to somebody more productive, this productivity terror just kicking in. But then it was sometime later that I realized that was productive. It was important for me. Something was happening there, and I had to go through that period. But it is now, in hindsight, that I can say that. And now that I live here in Belgrade, I think my relationship with it has influenced a lot of my writing in a very organic way. Mm-hmm. So in the end, it was productive, but not in terms of the number of words on the page.
I really like what you say here, because I think like sometimes in like this frenzied world we live in, there's really this like, there's the fear of losing out and like this or missing out. And it's just always this thing like, you have to be always productive. You always have to sell yourself, perform and do something. And I think we kind of forget how important it is to just like, let go of everything and actually be bored and like actually just like let this, almost wrinkle in time, appear that like gives you actually like this new idea or a new push to do something. Now, when I was reading your essay, it kind of reminded me to some extent of the quote by Italo Calvino from Invisible Cities. Because as you say, like Belgrade for you is not, an unknown city, but you did have to find your footing in one way or the other. And like in one of his like one quote of Calvino is, arriving at each new city, the traveler finds, again, a past of his that he did not know he had. The foreignness of what you no longer are or no longer possess lies in waiting for you in foreign unpossessed places. And I think that was a bit what I was reading out of your essay, that like the city really brought up a new side of you, or something that you were searching for, that you were grappling with. But having said that, I think that like, and having read the essay and now seeing what is happening with you now and where you are, I think like you kind of came out, like you kind of like grappled with the things you had to grapple with, and now it's actually going, I mean, it's not a happy ending, but you know what I mean? I think you kind of came to a nice conclusion of that time. Another thing you mentioned in the essay is that at one point you were reading Gospodinov's The Physics of Sorrow, where he like, you know, picks apart the myth of the Minotaur. And then also, again, he even mentions it, I think, in the book. I was thinking of Borges and like the house of Asterión, where you have like the Minotaur being like, claro que no me faltan distracciones. And it was almost like the thing with you where you're like trying to distract yourself during this month, going on walks, going to different places, trying to fill up like whatever is kind of missing or not kind of working the way you want it to work. But in the end, I think from what I understand, like actually you did write some stuff, like you had writer's block, you were struggling, but there is a poem that you wrote during the time, which you can also find now on the Revisiting Belgrade page. So maybe you want to say something about that, like what were you trying to convey in this poem, or where did it came from?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great questions there, but it was for me, you know, this moment when you have to, you're dealing with a lot of things. So I'm there, I'm on my own, I'm dealing with insomnia. I was also dealing with depression, and it was like, I think it's important to talk about these things because, you know, this, as you said, this terror of productivity and just this fear, you know, I feel like we forget to talk about the other side of that medal. And then there was Belgrade, and there was this huge, you know, Belgrade comes from the word white city, you know, Belgrade, and I just felt that this whiteness was somehow a really powerful metaphor for my state of mind. It's just this emptiness, you know, this vastness, and the white page, the blank page as well. So it all kind of clicked for me that I'm trying to grapple with this, you know. What I mean, when you say whiteness in English, it has different connotations. What I'm talking is the absence of any color, emptiness, void. And this is what I was dealing with. And then I realized it comes from within. I can't blame it on the city. You know, I had been living in Barcelona for 7 years, and I was just used to a completely different rhythm, language, way of doing things, everything. And then there was this, you know, what I call the fragile monster. But you don't blame it for its monstrosity. You see that things have been done to it. I mean, Belgrade has suffered so much under different stories, different myths, different insanities. And I thought, like, okay, there's something that we share. You know, this fragile monster and I, we share something, and perhaps, you know, it's literally like meeting somebody at an anonymous reunion or something for whichever problem or situation. And just like maybe you don't want to see yourself in that person, but you do have something in common. And that's what happened to me with Belgrade. And then the poem was something, I mean, I don't normally I write fiction. To me, like I like to tell stories. But this was something very personal, and it was just me kind of jotting down different ideas and me dealing with this void and dealing with depression and dealing with insomnia and dealing with writer's block and the blank page. And I felt like I'm carrying a bear, a huge, you know, grizzly bear on my shoulders, but it's not the bear's fault. I have to do something with it. And that's how, you know, the poem kind of happened. And then I went back to it and edited just a bit, just to give it some sort of unity. And I felt that, even though I'm a fiction writer primarily, that was an important, like that one poem was an important step for me, or a kind of obstacle that I had to cross and then be able to write again. And then you mentioned Gospodinov. I mean, that book, which I read during that residency, which is also about a monster, but, trying to understand this monster from a different point of view. And then you realize where monstrosity comes from, and that it has to do with myth and narrative and the point of view. And then that book ended up being pivotal for my next collection of stories. So as I said, in the end, it was a really useful month in Belgrade.
Yeah, that's actually something I wanted to mention now, is that out of this residency, I think during the residency, you already wrote a short story that was somewhat inspired by Gospodinov's book. And out of that then grew your next short story collection. So maybe tell us a bit about what this collection is about.
So as you know, there's in Gospodinov's books, the Physics of Sorrow, there's the myth of the Minotaur, who is seen as an abandoned child, a child abandoned in a labyrinth. And there was this one line that I loved that said, in the beginning of every story, in the beginning of everything, there's a child. I read it in Serbian, so now I'm trying to translate it into English. There is a child thrown into the basement. All these sad stories begin with a child being abandoned. So I took that one line out, and I decided to write about different, trauma that children experience, especially in the Balkans, and how their experience is seen as less worthy, or their suffering is seen as not that big of a deal because they're just kids, and how we always kind of underestimate their emotions and how they experience the world. And actually these children will grow up to become people who will do certain things. So it's very easy to grow a monster in this kind of climate. So this for me was an important way of looking at things, not to idealize childhood, not to victimize them, but to show them actually as second-rate citizens, because they live in this world where somebody else is making the rules, all the rules. They just have to follow them. And these people are not infallible. It's their parents who can have any sort of problems of their own, and make a lot of mistakes. So what I did was look at different ways that children can experience trauma, from the way you talk to them, from physical violence, verbal violence, society that kind of teaches them to do one thing, what's wrong and what's right. And then some of them, will go one way or the other, because this is their starting position. So yeah, in the end, once I had it, then writer's block was completely gone, and
everything was so.
Exactly. But I mean, that's when I realized, wow, I actually was going through a really important process. And without that process, I wouldn't have been able to write this book. So so now I feel like whenever I experience any kind of block, I feel like, oh, this is great, because something's
going to happen out of it.
Exactly. Something good is coming up, because something is out there brewing. So yeah, I'm really happy, and the book is now I'm here showing all the books that I have here are red for some reason, but the collection is out, and I'm really happy with it, and we already have some translation deals. So yeah, thank you Belgrade.
And thank you, Gospodinov. I hope he gets a copy of the book. Or is there going to be a Bulgarian translation? Do we already know? Yes?
Of the novel, yes. Of the short stories, not yet. But okay. I hope so, yeah.
But in any case, he should get a copy, and one way or the other. So that's great. So So you had now this like short story collection, but I believe also another book of yours came out recently, which is kind of like a joint effort with 5 other writers. So maybe you want to say something about that. I think it's called 2020. So just give us a brief overview of what's that all about.
Yeah, that was really strange because back in 2019, I had this idea that I wanted to do something in the form of a diary, which for me was kind of getting out of my comfort zone, just inventing stories. And I thought like it would be interesting to invite 5 other writers from former Yugoslavia and to see what we could do together, kind of asking the question, is there anything that still connects us, even though, you know, we now live in different countries? What is this shared experience? We were all born in the 80s. So let's see what we can do. Not from a, you know, nostalgic point of view, because that's not our nostalgia. We're too young for that. But just like, you know, let's see what connects us. So we started writing and everybody got 2 separate months. So I was writing in January and July. And the deal was you have to write every day. You know, it could be a page, it could be a sentence, but you have to sit every day and write. And of course, none of us had any idea back in 2019 what 2020 would be like. So I had one sentence in January saying the Chinese New Year has been canceled because of some virus. And then that sentence kind of takes over the whole book. And but then it's not just the pandemics. It's been really crazy for the Balkans in general. You know, there was the election in Montenegro, protests in Belgrade and Ljubljana. There was the devastating earthquake in Zagreb. So all of these things were happening, and we were just kind of documenting it. And and now we have the book, and I just love it. Because everybody has a different style. Everybody focuses on something, you know, different. And then you realize that actually reality is also a genre and it depends on your style. So I'm really happy about this. And I'm so proud of these 5 people for pulling it off. So yeah, this is.
Yeah, maybe we also need to mention that, like, I think Diana Matkovic, who's also like in this book, I think she's also your translator. She translated Catch the Rabbit into Slovene. At least that's what I think. So which is great.
But she's also I really like her essays, and she's working on her first novel now. And I think she also gave us a really nice perspective here. She talks a lot about class and, you know, this, you know, Janša, Slovenia, and all of these things that I think
we should not go into this.
We're not going to go into that, but, you know, it's interesting because nobody was writing like political essays. It was all very personal. So, you know, you have Luisa Bukharova in Zagreb not being able to afford rent, and then there's an earthquake falling through her roof, and now she doesn't even have a place. So it's like there's a lot of things there, but from the personal point of view, which I think sometimes tells more about our day and age than, you know, vast political essays.
Anyway, congratulations on that. I think we also have to mention there's gonna be a short story of yours, I think forthcoming in Freeman's Magazine. So we're also looking forward to that. Coming back to the residencies, I know you also had some other residencies now following Belgrade. You were in Zurich at the beginning of this year. So how is it for you now to go on a residency? Are you more relaxed going into it, or do you still kind of like, you know, grapple with the whole thing?
Well, I've become sort of a residency beast in a way, because now I've actually been, I think last year and this year, I've spent more time in residencies than, you know, at home. And I've learned how to use that time productively, but also how to approach, you know, every city and try to pick up the language and kind of find some inspiration to move forward. So I'm very happy because I don't like to stay in one place for too long. And this has just been perfect for me, especially when I get to meet other writers and see what people are doing abroad. And then kind of, I think it's useful for a writer to get out of his or her literary circle, because that, you know, if you spend too much time there, you can start thinking that that's the whole world, and it isn't. And, you know, all the little petty discussions that happen there, whatever, you know, you realize that no, literature is actually much broader and bigger, and, you know, it's just one big dialogue. And so I'm so happy whenever I get invited to residency, because I feel that I'm, you know, taking part in this bigger dialogue. So yeah, I'm looking forward to my next one.
Brilliant. Anyway, thank you so much for being with us today. Just some more things before we let you go, dear audience. So do read Lana Bastašić, Fang den Hasen. Catch the Rabbit is, I think, out now in several different languages. I think it's already 10 or even more. So go to a bookseller you can find it, and they will let you know if they have this. Then, as Lana mentioned, of course, Jorge Gospodino, always a good read, so you can pick that up. In your essay, you actually also talk about Danilo Kish and how you went to him for guidance to the new cemetery. So this, of course, you can also read Danilo Kish, Familiencircus in German, for example, but also translated in various other languages. What I also liked in your essay is, I think there were like some parts that when you actually talk about the confluence of the Danube and the Sava, like there was this one small bit that kind of reminded me of, like, I think Dasha Drnic and Trieste, where she talks about the Zonsa River. So there were really like wonderful bits in this essay that like really made me go like, oh, so nice. So yeah, everyone, please check it out. The essay is now online as well as the poem. I hope you enjoyed this talk. Thank you again, Lana. And for everyone interested, our next series will go from this big city of Belgrade to a smaller city, a bit more Barcelona, perhaps, because the next residency will be in Split. So I hope I'll see you then, and thank you and enjoy. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Barbara. Bye-bye.